Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to challenge a really big business myth.
Oh, yeah.
This idea that great salespeople are just born that way, these natural charmers.
Right.
We're setting that aside and diving straight into the science. Our sources today are all about behavioral and cognitive research, a lot of it from David Hoffeld, looking at the psychology of how we're influenced and how we decide things.
Yeah, and our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're unpacking this idea that success in selling, and I mean selling anything, a product, an idea, yourself, it's not some innate talent.
It's a system.
It's a system. It's a discipline. It's about aligning your strategy with how the human brain is already hardwired to make a decision.
Yeah.
If you get how the buyer thinks, you can just stop guessing.
And that's crucial for everyone listening, no matter what you do. If you're trying to influence any outcome, a job interview, a product launch, this deep dive gives you a scientifically backed roadmap. It's really a shortcut to knowing what actually makes people act.
And we desperately need that roadmap. Just look at traditional sales methods. They're failing.
Numbers are pretty bad.
They're terrible. We lean on old school techniques, expert opinions with no data. Studies show that somewhere between, 38 to almost half 49% of salespeople consistently failed to hit their minimum quotas.
Wow.
If that many people are struggling, the problem isn't the people. It's the system. It's the traditional wisdom. It's broken.
So we have to move from instinct to actual data on psychology.
Exactly.
That's a perfect place to start, then. Let's tackle that first big idea, this fixed belief that sales is just a personality trait, that you're either born a smooth talker or you're not.
And thankfully, the research just completely dismantles that idea.
Yeah.
It connects directly to the foundational work from Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck on mindsets. She found there are two fundamentally different ways people see their own abilities.
And this kind of shapes everything, right? Including how well you do in sales.
Everything. I think most people can probably see themselves in one of these two camps.
I think so.
On one side, you've got the fixed mindset. This is the belief that your core abilities, your intelligence, your creativity, your ability to sell are static. They're just fixed traits.
You've either got it or you don't.
You've got it or you don't.
Yeah.
And for a salesperson with that mindset, failure is just devastating. It's proof that they've hit their limit.
Right, and it just reinforces that negative story they tell themselves, makes them afraid to try new things or even ask for help.
Exactly. But Dweck's work really champions the other side, the growth mindset.
Which is the belief that you can improve.
That abilities can be developed through effort, through good training, through persistence. People with this mindset, they see failure totally differently. It's not a verdict on who they are.
It's just data.
It's critical data for how to improve. And they achieve much, much higher results because they're fundamentally open to learning.
So this isn't just, a philosophical feel-good difference. There's actual science showing our brains can change.
Absolutely. This is where we get into neuroplasticity.
Right.
We now know for a fact that the brain can be rewired. Continued deliberate training physically alters the brain's neural pathways. The right behaviors literally carve out new connections related to influence and social thinking.
That's such a powerful idea. It's not just practice makes perfect. It's that the right kind of practice, the kind aligned with science, actually changes your biological capacity to be influential.
It does, but there's a really important catch.
Okay.
If your training is based on those old instinct-based methods, you just get really, really good at an ineffective strategy. The training has to align with how the buyer's brain actually works.
That's the key to making neuroplasticity work for you.
That's the key.
Okay, so let's shift from the seller's brain to the buyer's brain. This is where it gets really foundational. We need to talk about the two different ways our brains process being influenced, based on the work of Richard Petty and John Cacioppo.
Right. This model is absolutely essential. We have two systems running in our heads, usually without us even realizing it. The first one is called the central pathway.
Okay, so describe that central pathway for us.
The central pathway is like the serious logical part of your mind. It's systematic, it's deliberate, it needs facts, figures, data.
It takes effort.
A lot of effort. It's slow. But, and this is the important part, when you win an argument on the central path, that change in attitude is deep. It's lasting. The commitment is solid.
So for any big, important sale, you have to engage that pathway, or else the buyer might back out later.
Precisely. But then there's the other system, the peripheral pathway.
Which is the opposite.
Completely. This one is fast, it's automatic, it's low effort, it doesn't do a deep analysis. Instead, it just looks for simple clues. for mental shortcuts. We call them heuristics.
And this is the trap, right? A lot of salespeople accidentally appeal to this fast, superficial path.
Exactly. They focus on a flashy presentation or building quick rapport, and you might get a quick yes, but it's often a temporary one that falls apart.
So true scientific selling has to aim for the central path, but you still need to understand these peripheral shortcuts.
Oh, absolutely, because they show us what influences people immediately. Let's look at a few. They're really fascinating.
Okay, let's start with one that seems totally backwards. Single option aversion. You'd think presenting just one perfect solution would be the simplest, best way to go.
Logic would say so.
Huh.
But our brains actually hate being presented with only one choice.
Why is that?
It's an unconscious fear of missing out, a fear of being locked into a bad decision. If there's only one option, you have no context, no way to judge its value.
Is there data on that?
There's a great study. When customers were shown just one new digital device, only 10% of them bought it.
Only 10%.
But then when they were offered multiple comparable devices to choose from, the purchase rate shot up to 90%.
Wow, so adding options doesn't complicate things. It actually makes the decision feel safer.
It reduces the perceived risk. It gives you a benchmark.
That's amazing. Okay, so how to use that comparison strategically? This brings us to the decoy effect, right?
Right, or non-dominant alternatives. This is where you intentionally introduce a slightly inferior third option, the decoy, to make your preferred option look like a fantastic deal.
The famous magazine subscription experiment is the classic example of this.
It's perfect. So students were offered two choices: online access for $59 or a combined print and online package for $125.
Okay.
In that scenario, most people, about 68%, chose the cheaper online one. Only 32% took the combo deal. But then the researchers added a decoy,
The third option,
a print-only subscription for $125.
the same price as the combo.
The exact same price.
Yeah.
And suddenly, the $125 print and online option looked like an incredible bargain. You're getting the online part for free. And what happened?
The numbers flipped.
Completely. 84% of students now chose the $125 combo deal. The decoy provided a reference point that made the value obvious.
It's not about tricking people. It's about helping the brain assess value.
Exactly. And the last one is maybe the most powerful of all: social proof.
We're all deeply influenced by what other people are doing.
We are fundamentally wired that way, especially when we feel uncertain. You can go back to the classic Solomon Asch studies on conformity.
Where people would agree with a group even if the group was obviously wrong.
Right. 75% of participants cave to group pressure at least once. So for a seller, the lesson is clear. Use testimonials, mention how many other clients have bought in, show that people just like them have already made this choice. It lowers the buyer's feeling of risk.
So using a phrase like, most managers in your industry have already adopted this.
It's a powerful psychological lever. It removes that feeling of being the only one taking a risk.
Okay, so since we know that lasting deals happen on that central path, how do we guide the buyer through that logical process? This is where the 6 strategic commitment questions come in.
This is the framework. Scientific selling is about getting a series of small yeses, small commitments that lead to the final decision. The sales process has to map onto the buyer's internal thought process.
And their brain is basically trying to answer 6 core questions. Let's focus on the ones that are the biggest deal breakers.
Let's start with the first hurdle, the one that stops most deals dead. Question 1. Why change?
This is all about status quo bias.
Pure inertia. We are hardwired to resist change. We'd rather stick with a familiar problem than risk the unknown of a new solution.
So how do you overcome that?
The insight is that people only commit to change when the pain of their current situation feels greater than the cost and risk of your solution.
So your first job isn't to sell the solution, it's to sell the problem.
You have to make them feel the pain. Make the cost of doing nothing crystal clear. Only then will they be open to changing.
Okay, so once you get that commitment to change, you immediately hit the next wall.
Question 2. Why now?
The procrastination monster.
Exactly. Even if they agree there's a problem, why not just wait a few months? This is usually driven by a fear of loss of comfort, time, control.
So putting on fake pressure like this deal expires Friday, that can backfire.
It often creates resistance. The scientific approach is to frame the action as the natural, logical next step to solving the pain that you've just agreed on.
It's not forced urgency, it's logical inevitability.
A much more powerful frame. It reduces that internal friction.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Establish the problem, establish the timing. And this all leads to the big one that closes the deal. Question 6, why paid this price? What's going on in our heads when we decide to spend money?
It comes down to two huge psychological drivers. The first is pretty simple, the desire for profit or gain.
The positive stuff, more efficiency, more revenue.
Exactly, that's important. But the real heavyweight, the thing that really drives our decisions, is the other motive.
The fear of loss.
The fear of loss. This comes from the Nobel Prize-winning work of Daniel Kahneman on loss aversion. And his research proved that we feel the pain of a loss about twice as strongly as we feel the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
Twice as strongly. Why is it so powerful?
It's evolutionary. Avoiding threats, avoiding loss was way more important for survival than getting an extra benefit. That ancient wiring is still running our modern brains. We are programmed to protect what we have.
That insight changes everything. We spend so much time talking about the return on investment, the gain. But a better strategy is to frame the purchase as preventing a loss.
Absolutely. Don't just say you'll gain $50,000 in revenue.
You say.
The more effective frame is, if you don't do this, you risk losing $50,000 this quarter. It reframes the purchase from an optional investment to an essential defense.
That's a huge shift. And it brings us perfectly to our last area. Emotion. We've gone through the logic, the biases, but how much does pure emotion play into all this, even when we think we're being totally rational?
Emotion isn't just a part of decision-making. It's a prerequisite. Research by Antonio Damasio showed that without emotion, we can't assign value to things. We can't decide what's important. A decision that feels purely logical, purely told, will almost always stall.
So my own enthusiasm as a seller isn't just being friendly, it's a piece of data for the client's brain.
It is, literally. It's a phenomenon called emotional contagion.
We catch emotions from each other.
Unconsciously, we mirror the emotional state of the people around us. So if you project genuine confidence, enthusiasm, happiness, it triggers those same positive feelings in the client and makes them more receptive.
And this isn't just about the words we use, it's how we say them. The old breakdown. 7% words, 38% tone of voice.
And 55% body language. That breakdown is so important because the nonverbal cues carry most of the emotional weight. A strong, confident vocal tone grabs attention. If your own tone sounds uncertain, the logic of your words gets completely lost.
Confidence is contagious. And speaking of observation, let's touch on the Hawthorne effect.
Right. This comes from studies where just the act of observing workers made their performance improve.
How does that apply here?
Well, the act of giving intense, focused attention to a client's problem can actually prompt an unconscious desire in them to solve it. By deeply exploring their pain points, you're not just getting info, you're actually amplifying their own motivation to change.
This has been an incredible deep dive. It really strips away the art and mystery of selling and replaces it with a clear, actionable strategy.
It really does. It shows that the highest performing salespeople aren't just lucky or charming, they're applied scientists. They align their entire process with the psychological steps a buyer has to go through to feel safe and confident. It's a systematic, science-backed approach, and it gives you a real competitive edge that, frankly, anyone can learn.
So the final takeaway for you listening should be this. The goal is to make the buyer feel confident and self-directed in their decision. And that confidence isn't built in one big pitch.
Wow.
It's built by guiding them step by step through those logical commitments while also skillfully managing their emotional state.
I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on, something that builds on all this. We said that procrastination, the thing that kills most deals, is rooted in the fear of loss. So if sales is really about managing the buyer's emotions and biases, especially loss aversion, what does that imply about the right balance between transparency and strategic persuasion when you're trying to build long-term trust? And for your next conversation, your next attempt to influence someone, what's the one small science-backed change you'll try first? Will you focus on preventing a loss or promising a gain?
Something to think about as you navigate your next critical conversation. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.